so our opening question, and it's a pretty wide open question, is what is a difficult biblical command for people to follow, and why do you think that particular command is difficult for people to follow? Probably the one in our restoration movement that's very difficult for a lot of people to follow, we could say, would be baptism. And why do you think that's a hard one for people to follow that? You think it's not clear in Scripture? I would say no, it's really clear. It's like one guy said, it's not the things I don't understand from the Bible that bother me, it's the things I do understand that bother me. And so I think it's because in some ways it doesn't make sense to people. They try to reason it out, and they get confused with salvation by grace through faith and kind of stop the discussion there. And they don't continue to say, well, what does that really mean? And what do we see as examples in the Scriptures there? What's another biblical command that people have a hard time following? And why do you think that is, Ross?
To die to ourselves, deny ourselves daily, and follow Jesus.
Why is that hard?
Because of self.
Because we're selfish people, right? So, and I think these microphones are picking up pretty well tonight, and except maybe for Nancy over here. So I probably won't repeat things as much as I normally do. So anyway, that's deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow Jesus, Luke 9:23. That's one that we all have to wrestle with daily, right? Marcy.
The Lord's Supper.
Okay.
It is the first day of the week, not once a month or once a year.
Okay, or once a quarter, or whenever we feel like it, or that thing. And so Marcy is talking about the Lord's Supper and how we observe it weekly. And why do you think that's hard for people? Why do you think that's difficult? Anybody got an idea? Go ahead.
We're busy.
Okay.
Or Sunday we want off. We don't want to go anywhere.
Okay.
We want to stay home.
Okay. Okay, good.
Wasn't it originally just a Passover thing, though? It was done during the Passover?
Sure, that's where it started with Jesus, to
so
do this in remembrance of me.
I'm wondering how many of them are still doing that Old Testament commandment just to
Okay.
do it on the Passover.
Good, good. Maybe once a year on Easter or something, huh? Okay, so that might be a reason why people struggle with that. And again, I think other people might say, well, it gets routine. It's not special anymore. Well, it is to me. And, I think it is what you make of it. It's just like being married. If I don't think Shirley's special, which I do, if I think of her as routine, it won't be special. But if I treat her that way every day, she doesn't ever say, knock it off. Knock it off. You're just doing too much for me, So I think God would be the same way as we worship Him. I don't think He's saying, hey, you guys are doing that too much. We have the record in the Scripture that on the first day of the week, they remembered Jesus in that way. Michelle?
I was just going to say, we've visited a lot of different kinds of churches, like Baptist or Pentecost, like different kinds, and we've had a lot of different, either crazy, we were kind of put off by it. But one of the things I did appreciate is one of the churches, we came from a Church of Christ, and then we visited a different church. One of the churches only did it, once a quarter that we visited. We just so happened to be visiting on that day. And they were doing communion, and it was a big production, and there was this dramatic thing. People were crying, and they're taking communion and crying. And it wasn't a charismatic church, so they weren't crying because it was a charismatic, but they were really moved by it. And I just sat there and I thought, wow, I don't feel like that every week. I feel kind of bad, but I also, I appreciate it doing it every single week, and I would rather have it that way.
Yeah.
But seeing the reaction to, okay, now let's reflect on this, and we only do it so often because that's just the way that church did it. It gave me an appreciation for it.
Okay, good. Good, Michelle. Doris?
I would say Romans 13:1, everybody must submit themselves to the governor authority, and there is no authority except that which God established. The authority that exists has been established by God, especially with the political and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people forget that.
Yeah. So why is it difficult for people to submit to the governing authorities and follow what they say?
They're insane.
What was that, Marcy?
They're insane.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they're still established by God.
Yeah.
It could be
So it's
very
established by God. I think because we're independent people, we like to do what we want to do. We don't like being told what to do, even whether it's by God or the governor or, you know, the Cascade County Health Department or whoever. We just say, well, I've got a better idea, you know. But again, it goes back to maybe what Ross was sharing about selfishness.
Having a food establishment, you hit a spot with me there. I thought some of the stuff is so dumb.
Yeah.
But somebody said something to me and it helped. They said, if you don't want to follow the rules, maybe you shouldn't play the game.
Yeah.
And I
Shouldn't be
thought,
involved
well,
in it.
Right. And I thought, well, I want to play the game, so
Right.
I follow the rules. And even though I don't agree with it, it doesn't matter. Just
Right.
don't do the hoops. Do what
Right.
they want.
You have to.
It causes, there's peace.
Yeah.
And all your bases are covered.
And recently we were, as a church, we were told maybe there was one small little thing we weren't doing as far as paying unemployment for one of our employees. And so, you know, I thought, well, one says yes, look at the website, it says you don't have to, you know, we realize that we want to submit. That's kind of our go-to thing. Are we submitted to the governing authorities? Because I don't believe God will bless us if we aren't, you know. And so I called a friend of mine who's an accountant, and this person said, well, here's the number, you can just call the state. I said, well, we already called the state and they told us we needed to do it. So I just wanted to make sure that was good. We're willing to do it. You know, we're not fighting it. We just want, it was somewhat of a gray area, and so, you know, we're going to do it as a church, and so that's a part of that. Betty, go ahead.
This, the only time I've seen it done was here, but I think it's a really good idea. When a person is baptized, at least I've noticed Scott, and maybe y'all do too, say, do you have a confession to make? And
Absolutely.
say Christ is Lord.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
If I'm
that's
involved,
what it is.
that's really important to me. That was a confession I made when I right before I got into the water, and Jesus is Lord. And so what Betty, I think, is saying, it's a hard command to follow, making Jesus Lord of every area of your life. You know, it's an ongoing lifetime process. And so, you know, and Betty's just pointed out the importance of making that verbal confession. Now, if someone was baptized without doing that, are they still going to be okay? Most likely. Yeah, I'm sure God's grace will take care of
think it's
a lot of
good
that
thing.
things. But I think for us, it helps us and whoever is being baptized to recognize, oh, I'm submitting my life to Jesus from now forward. You know, that's what we're going on. Well, thank you for all your comments and that. Let's go ahead and turn to Genesis 22. And I found out this morning that Bill was not going to be able to teach. So anyway, we've got this put together throughout the day. And I'm thankful that God blessed me in that way. So we go ahead. Do you have a reader for the first 10 verses of Genesis 22? Anybody can read, is willing to read? And Ross, thank you.
Genesis 22, starting in verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said. "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son.
Okay. Stop there. We'll pick up in verse 11 here in just a minute. So as we read through there, what do we learn from Abraham and his response to God? I mean, right away it says he's being tested, right? He's being tested. And perhaps all of us are being tested right now in COVID-19, right? I mean, it's probably some truth to that and how we are going to respond to that. But all the things we talked about before we got to Genesis 22, those difficult biblical commands, I don't think any of those are more difficult than what God required of Abraham. I think that is like the supreme test. God, you gave me this son to fulfill your promise. Now you want me to go sacrifice him on an altar? Are you kidding me? Help me understand this, you know? I mean, it makes absolutely no human sense, does it? Am I missing something as far as the human sense? It makes absolutely no human sense at all, does it? And so, why does God give us tests like this? Maybe not quite like this, but why does he test us at a certain time? What do you think about that? Now, the test is different than a temptation. A temptation is to do evil. But a test, I think he gives that to us so we have opportunities to grow in our faith and to confirm our faith. You know, do I really believe what I say I believe? You know, if I believe it and the Bible says it, then I'm going to step out and do it, right? Any other ideas about these tests, Diana?
Well, this allows God to show his glory to us.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, he is going to do something.
Yeah. And it's really saying, God, you know more about this whole thing than I do. I can't figure it all out, but I'm trusting in you. You know, I have no other choice. You said it. I believe it. I'm going to do it. Were you going to say something, Victoria, and then Doris?
Yeah, sometimes I think that he tests us, and maybe it's not necessarily for us so much as it is to help somebody else through that test later on down the road. Good point. And, you know, 2 Corinthians says that the trials that we go through and we receive comfort from God in, we do that so that we can be a comfort to other people who might be going through something similar. Doris?
Also, I think that we trust in God, that God sees the bigger picture and are obedient regardless if we don't see it. Okay.
Trusting in God, God sees the bigger picture, and you know, I guess maybe it kind of comes down to how big is our God. Mm-hmm. You know, is God big enough to work this all out, even though it doesn't make any human sense at all? Marcy and then Michelle.
What's interesting is that he says to the people, me and the boy are going, but we'll be back.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm doing this, but God says,
we'll be back.
My nation's coming from this boy, and I believe it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
He was unwavering in his faith at this point, Michelle.
Just like you and Marcy both said, you said how big is our God, how powerful could he be? And in Hebrews it says that Abraham probably believed that he knew that Isaac would be raised from the dead. So if your faith in God is wavering, and you think there's a slight chance that he can't raise people from the dead, you know, that would come out in that moment where he had to raise the knife and kill his son.
Yeah.
He would have hesitated, you know, but he knew that God had that power, that nothing else has the power to raise from the dead but God, you know.
Right, and we'll read that tonight if we have time, Lord willing, in Hebrews, that he reasoned that God could raise the dead. You know, Ross?
I don't remember ever reading a record or an account in the Bible about Isaac recalling this experience. But,
He did, but I don't remember reading it either.
Can you imagine?
How could you not recall this experience?
Can you imagine the effect that this whole scene had on Isaac and his faith?
Well, that's a great point that you make, and you know, it seems as though Isaac didn't even think twice about going with his dad to offer sacrifice. It seemed like that was kind of customary. You know, again, we kind of see the idea that we still have today, that the family is responsible for passing on the faith to the next generation, and it seems like Abraham was doing a pretty good job with this, because, I mean, Isaac says, well, we've never done this before. He doesn't say that, or, you know, what's going on? He knows what's supposed to happen. Where's the sacrifice? He asks about that, and Abraham says God will provide.
Well, exactly. Abraham said God will provide, and he did.
Yeah.
So there's the faith again.
Yeah. And, you know, it just reminded me of a lot of things in our financial peace class that we did last year. And, you know, part of it is following God's financial plan. You have to believe that God knows what's best. And when you start getting on board with God's plan in your life, things start happening. You know, money starts coming in that financial peace thing. I mean, I could tell stories, others here in this room could tell stories. You know, I mean, we've done so well because we started to take this seriously and what God said about it. So, well, just some quick points as we continue to move forward. You know, he responds, "Here I am." You know, similar to Moses, Samuel. We could even think about maybe Isaiah and his call that he received. He got up early the next morning. He had a prompt obedience. He didn't say, oh, yeah, maybe in a couple weeks we'll think about that. It's not making sense to me right now. You know, it's quite a journey. 48 miles, basically. Some say 50, but I went with the shorter journey. How many of you have ever walked 48 miles? You know, in 3 days. I've done 20 in a day, but, you know, that was a big day. I was definitely tired after that, and, you know, I did that with my two sons in Boy Scouts, but Shirley did it too with us, but it was a long day. So he had some perseverance, and it's kind of interesting, this Beersheba to Mount Moriah. Really, it was Mount Moriah, and maybe some of you know that. It's really the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. And so right now, the Muslims have that part of Jerusalem, and it's the Dome of the Rock, is what it's called. And that's where the Temple of Solomon was built. So here we got this sacrifice planned by Abraham. He does complete that sacrifice with the ram. Later on, it becomes a place where sacrifices were given in the Temple of Solomon. Not far from there, guess what other sacrifice was in that same vicinity? Jesus, right? Pretty interesting. Any other thoughts about Abraham's response here? Go ahead, Marcy.
Well, when Ross was talking about Isaac, I heard a preacher one time say, you don't see the boy fighting when Abraham's, you know, getting ready for the sacrifice. He's willing.
Yeah. And scholars aren't sure about Isaac's age. They think probably he was at least a teenager, maybe older. So, you know, I don't know about you, but when my boys became, you know, 15 and above, they definitely could probably whip me, you know.
Don't let them know.
They know. They know. So, I mean, if he did protest, he probably could have won, you know. But it seems as though he really had received the faith of Abraham, through his upbringing, and he said, Dad, okay, whatever's going to happen here. So, but we see it's a sacrificial faith. I see it's kind of an adventuring faith. We see that, his response, he laid Isaac on top of the wood, and really it's an act of worship. And I think the other things I had there were pretty much already talked about. So anything else before we move on to that next section, 11 through 19? If I get someone to read that, Genesis 22, 11 through 19, and also someone to read what we referred to earlier, Hebrews 11, 17 through 19. So, and Steph, you want to?
11 through 19.
Okay. Anybody got the other one? Okay, Betty, thank you. Hebrews 11, 17 through 19. And then as we read this, just think about what lessons can be learned from this test of Abraham's faith.
Okay, Genesis 22, starting at 11. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven. The angel said, Abraham, Abraham. Abraham answered, yes. The angel said, don't kill your son or hurt him in any way. Now I can see that you respect God. I see that you have not kept your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham looked up and saw a male sheep. Its horns were caught in a bush. So Abraham went, took the sheep, and killed it. He offered it as a whole burnt offering to God. Abraham's son was saved. So Abraham named the place, the Lord gives. Even today, people say, on the mountain of the Lord it will be given. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time. The angel said, the Lord says, you did not keep back your son, your only son, from me. Because you did this, I make you the promise by my own name. I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. They will be as many as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. And they will capture the cities of their enemies. Through your descendants, all the nations on earth will be blessed. This is because you obeyed me. Then Abraham returned to his servants. They all traveled back to Beersheba, and Abraham stayed there.
Thank you, Steph. Betty?
Now faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death.
Okay, thank you, Betty. Appreciate that. So as we read through there, what are some lessons we can learn from this test of Abraham's faith? Well, the first one I just wrote down for myself was that there's that little phrase, but. Basically God sent an angel. And so we never know what exactly God will do. We know he can do whatever he decides to do. And so he does intervene in this situation. Any other observations here, Betty?
Kind of shows to you how to reason.
Okay.
We do have to reason about things.
Okay.
And he figured it out.
Yeah. So he reasoned that God could raise the dead. And that was a pretty big stretch in those days, wasn't it? I think it really shows us that, the story really isn't necessarily about Abraham. In a sense it is, but it's really about God, isn't it? We have a big God. And sometimes there's a book that was written many years ago called Your God is Too Small. You maybe read that book or seen that book. But, the whole idea is really that God is big enough to handle this. We don't have to take it into our own hands. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to, get all bent out of shape about something that seems too big for God, because there's really nothing too big for God. And so I think that's a good a good thing to think about. Michelle, are you just stretching? Okay, okay. Got to watch it. I'm kind of like an auctioneer. You raise your hand, I sold to the highest bidder. So, got to watch it. Anyway, another thought I had is that his faithfulness was equal to fearing God. You know, that's what the text says. You fear God, it's obvious. And then it's kind of interesting, he names this place, he memorializes this place, he calls it the Lord provides, or I think Steph's translation is a little bit different, but another possible way to translate that is that the Lord will see to it. I kind of like that. The Lord will see to it. He'll see to it that it gets handled, you know, but I think just having that mentality and that phrase in our minds, that the Lord will provide. The Lord provides for us, and for most of us, he provides very abundantly, you know, and not just physical ways, but spiritual ways and relational ways, fellowship ways, church ways, you know, so many things that we really have been blessed with. It's really incredible to be a part of this body of believers. And, you know, it's interesting because one of my friends who moved here not too long ago and is part of the church just said, you know, I guess it seems like the church is healthy. It seems like it's a healthy church. You know, we're not perfect, we know that. It can't be, because if I joined it, it wouldn't be perfect anymore. If it was perfect beforehand, it sure wouldn't be after I was a part of it. But, you know, it's a good thing that people can see that. And certainly we can all grow and become more what God wants us to become. But any other thoughts about Abraham here in this test, 11 through 19? Marcy?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
About this, what he went through, it's a refining.
Okay.
There's a scripture that I go to when I'm thinking, I think God's refining me. It's Isaiah 48:10. It says, "Behold, I refine you, but not with silver. I have chosen you in the furnace of affliction." And I love that, because in the furnace of affliction, that's where the trying is. You know, like, give up your son. If he said no, he'd be getting himself out of that furnace, and he wouldn't be chosen.
Yeah.
You got to stay in there. You know,
Yeah.
trust him. Go with it. It's gonna be all right.
Yeah.
And you'll get chosen. You know, God will be pleased. I always think of a nice pat on the head. You're done good. You hope at the end anyway. But that's what I love. I just thought I'd share it.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a very good point, that God refines us through difficult circumstances, suffering, you know, those kinds of things. And, you know, just having heard some of your stories in the past, you know, we all have that in our lives. Nobody is immune to that or is accepted from that suffering. Sometimes when we're going through that, we think, I'm the only one. But when you really start talking to people, you realize that this is really common. This is really a common experience. It might not be exactly, but there's similarities there. And, you know, once you start understanding that, it kind of like, oh, wow. So this is how God works. You know, God works when we're going through tough times. And how many of us grow more during tough times than we ever do during the easy times? Probably all of us, if we're honest with each other and with ourselves. So it makes total sense. And we see his faith was very devoted. We talked about how he knew there was a big, powerful God, that he didn't let his feelings take him away. He reasoned that God could raise the dead. He didn't seem to worry about how this was going to happen or why this was happening. He just knew God would take care of it. And what a great example of faith. We also see in Abraham, he was not going to withhold anyone or anything from God. You know, it's a tremendous example of that. And this last one I wrote down was that obedient faith leads to blessings for us and also to other people. You know, we're blessed through Abraham's obedience. You know, I don't know what would have happened had he said, no, God, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, you made that promise. I'm going to go with the first one, but this other stuff, you know, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, he said, oh, you said it, I believe it, that settles it. So as we think about Isaac here, and the next question is, how are Isaac and Jesus similar? You know, really, Isaac is a type. We use that word type or foreshadowing of Jesus. And, you know, we already talked about the place. You know, they both happened in that Jerusalem area. So go ahead, Michelle, and then Diane.
He carries the firewood that he's supposed to die on.
Okay.
And Jesus had to carry the cross, and he followed what his father said he needed to do, and so did Jesus.
Well, Isaac carried the wood. Jesus carried the wood of the cross for a blessing for all mankind fulfilled. Okay, Diane.
That was very similar to what I was going to say. He was definitely didn't fight it. You know, he submitted.
He surrendered, yeah.
But also, some scholars say he was about the same age.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be they say at least a teenager, possibly, you know, like you say, 30, 33, you know, could be in there. So I hadn't really thought about that, but that's very true. They could have been approximately the same age. So that's good. Marcy?
I don't know, you know, you always have years on your chapters. And according to my Bible, it looks like he was around 20.
Right.
But I don't know.
They say somewhere between like 15 and 32 or 3, I think.
But you know, he was still probably a young adult for that,
Yeah.
you know, era.
He's young and strong enough to be a good pack mule, right? He could carry the wood, right? The heavy stuff. You give him the heavy stuff to carry. So, Ross?
He talked to his dad. He was trying to figure out what was going to happen because he didn't see the sacrificial animal anywhere. And Jesus prayed to God in the garden, Lord, Father, if I can avoid this, I'd like to do that, but your will be done, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of a similar discussion.
Not my will, but your will be done.
Yeah.
Talk to his father. I like that. That's good. Good insight into that. And how about some other thing? Both their births were promised in advance. They both occurred miraculously. Really? I mean, Joe?
His only son.
It says, you know, this is my only son whom I love. You know, Jesus, God told him that 2 or 3 times when he was baptized, Mount of Transfiguration for Jesus, and then on his way to the cross. And so here we see that, basically that same phrase, my only son whom I love. Good, Joe, thank you. What else do you notice, Diane?
Many people were blessed through it.
Say again?
Many people were blessed.
Oh, yeah. Many people were blessed through this event, both Old Testament and then, of course, fulfilled. Ultimately, the ultimate blessing came with Jesus through this. Abraham's descendant also. Ishel?
Well, they were both innocent of whatever crime, you know, I mean, neither one of them had done anything to deserve the death.
So they were innocent. Is that what I'm hearing you say? They're both innocent. Neither one of them had done anything to deserve that or that kind of a death. Let's see what else I wrote down here. Abraham believed God would raise Isaac from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead. What else? Marcy?
Because I did this, he said that a nation was coming, and through the resurrection, the death of Christ, the burial, then the resurrection, and then the ascension,
Yeah.
the kingdom of Christ, our great nation. It's the world power.
Yeah.
The year of our Lord, 2021.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we still remember. You know, all of our time is marked by Jesus. we do every day, every year, every week. You know, it's pretty phenomenal. Ross?
I was thinking about Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat his 12 sons, including Joseph, who eventually saved who knows how many lives because he figured out how to pool the Pharaoh's resources so that people didn't starve to death. You know, so, and Jesus saves millions of lives every day.
Amen. Amen. Good. Both cases, who provided the sacrifice? God, right? God provided the sacrifice. And it's really, this is the first time we see kind of that concept of a substitute sacrifice, the ram for Isaac, and then Jesus substitutes for us, Mark 10:45. So I think we covered a lot of it. Anybody else have anything else they can think of? Pretty phenomenal when you think about it. And, you know, how many of you have thought of those kinds of things by reading this before? I hadn't really. I hadn't really thought about it that much before. And as I was studying, I started seeing little things, and then, of course, part of what I was reading started pointing out more of those. But certainly as we look at that last question, how are you blessed because Abraham obeyed? Well, I don't know about you, but I really feel like because I'm in Christ, I have a very blessed life. I've been prevented from the scriptures from making a lot of mistakes in my life, and that doesn't mean I still don't make mistakes, but there's a lot of mistakes just following God's word that I've been able to avoid because I believe God knows best. And so I believe I have a very blessed life as a result of that. What are some of the other blessings that we have? Through Abraham, through Christ. Go ahead,
We
Victoria.
have an awesome example from Abraham of listening to God, of being faithful, of what God will provide. I mean, just from start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. We got that salvation life. You know, it's more than just the event of salvation. It's a whole life of salvation that we enjoy. We've got forgiveness of sins. We've got the Holy Spirit. We've got the Word of God. We've got the hope of the resurrection. We've got heaven to look forward to. And we are tremendously blessed people, aren't we? It's really, really amazing what God has done in our lives for us. Any other comments before we close out tonight? Well, I want to just encourage all of us to think about doing something this week that will stretch our faith. I don't know what that'll be for me. I don't know what that'll be for you. But, you know, just keep that awareness in your life. If there's something that's going to stretch your faith, say, I'm going to try to step into that. So thanks again for all your comments. Thanks for being here tonight. And be prepared for the wintry weather that's coming. It's going to get worse than what we've had for quite a while. So just be prepared for that. And look forward to seeing you on Sunday, Lord willing. Thank you.